From Capital News, Illinois, welcome to a special edition of Capital Cast, Election 2026. In this series, we're featuring major party candidates for statewide offices in the upcoming March 17th primary. Today, we're talking with Representative Margaret Croke, a Democratic candidate for Illinois Comptroller. She is currently a state representative from Chicago. CNI reporters Peter Hancock and Brenden Moore spoke with Representative Croke on Tuesday, January 27th. Here now is that interview.
Thank you, State Representative Margaret Croke, for joining us. We'll just get right into it. Why do you want the job, and why do you have the best experience for this job?
Thanks, Brenden. So I'm running for Illinois Comptroller because I think right now it's a really crucial moment for our state as we just see all the chaos that's kind of occurring around us in the federal government. And I think this is the opportunity for someone who understands that we need to make sure that our fiscal house stays in order, that there's fiscal responsibility in our state for future generations. But at the same time, that does go hand in hand with protecting our most vulnerable communities. Why I believe I'm the most qualified for this position is just my background. I've been at 3 different levels of government: county, city, and then state. I was Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, an office that's larger than the comptrollers and also oversees the disbursement of billions of dollars. And we took that office over after Rauner, so it was completely decimated and we had to rebuild it. And there is something that is unique about state government. Understanding how they all operate together, how you are part of a wheel that is ultimately, hopefully, trying to get in the same direction for the state of Illinois. But even just the things like hiring, understanding how personnel works in the state of Illinois, that you have union and merit comp and appointed employees, or how to get things done in the legislature. We all have seen bills pass and we've seen bills blow up, and it's because of your relationships or if you understand how to get these things done. So I feel really confident about my ability to kind of steer the ship in the right direction, and have that mission of being someone who's obviously empathetic, who cares about every single person in the state of Illinois, but also wants to make sure that my 3 kids have opportunities here and that they stay here.
Representative, you're in a race with 3 other candidates who have kind of a diverse array of experiences that they bring to the table. There's a state legislator with a background in social work. There's another legislator who's a financial advisor and a county treasurer. Wondering what makes you stand out from your opponents? What part of your background or your qualifications do you think separates you from the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at all levels of government, and I think that they all operate very differently, but they all interact with the comptroller's office. So my background, like I mentioned, before I was a state rep, I was Deputy Chief of Staff at the Commerce. And I feel like that position kind of preps you for something of this magnitude. I oversaw personnel, legislative affairs, and special projects, like very large teams within the comptroller's office. And then now as a rep, I've paid such crazy attention to the budget, understanding where we're funding, how we're funding things. I would say too, what makes me unique, having the experience in those other units of government, I kind of consider the comptroller to be doing constituent services to those local units of government. One of the things that I have heard as I've been running, around statewide is how difficult it is to comply with the different auditing requirements. So I kind of go back to that constituent services that I started at Cook County and trying to make it so government actually works for people. And I hope we haven't lost that within the comptroller's office. How are we serving the people of Illinois? How are we serving local units of government? And how is the comptroller's office interacting with every single agency, the constitutional officers, and the legislature?
And Representative, of course, the office has some very specific roles that are laid out in statute, in the Constitution, but it's also a political office. So I'm wondering how you kind of view the role of comptroller. Is it more of an administrative position or one in which you're going to be pushing policy goals with your colleagues in the legislature?
I see it as a programmatic office, as administrative office, but I won't lie and say like I'm not a person who cares deeply about things, right? I got into politics and government because I care deeply. I ended up staying in government because I got addicted to that feeling you get when you're able to make someone's life better. I mean, the best legislation I've ever written has come directly from my constituents. So I don't think I'll ever lose that part of me. But what I am excited about with the comptroller's office is actually the things that probably make people you kind of roll their eyes in their back of their head. They're like incredibly bored by them. I think it's why I still chair financial institutions because it's so technical and I love that about it. And we pass things very unanimously without any type of like partisan nature in them. That's how I see the comptroller's office is, I look at some of the programs that I would like to emphasize or the programs that I would like to improve, whether that's better systems in place, adding transparency. To me, that's not political. Being able to have a better vendor payment program in place so we're helping small businesses and our smaller vendors, and streamlining audits. Those are things I get really into. I hope that everyone running just wants to make sure that this office continues to work because when it breaks down, state government breaks down.
You're running in this race. It's an open race because the incumbent, Susana Mendoza, has decided not to seek another term. She has been a fairly large presence in that office. She's been a very high profile, especially during the budget stalemate during the Rauner administration. Wondering, what's your assessment of how she has performed on the job, and what, if anything, do you think you would do differently?
Yeah, she walked into a burning building in 2016. The house was on fire and she had to put it out. And I think her, as well as Governor Pritzker, have done a great job of eliminating the bill backlog. And I think it's hard to do some of the things that I would like to do if it was not for the fact that she's stabilized the office. So I give her all the kudos, all the credit in making sure that office continues to run and that we've been able to kind of get on good financial footing. Some of the things that I would like to see improved, and I don't say this is at any fault of Comptroller Mendoza, but I've seen in other states, I've seen the software where you can follow appropriations within the budget and understand where taxpayer money is going. And I think at this critical time, when you have household budgets that are, really tight, and then our state budget is getting very tight, people want to know how you're using taxpayer money, especially in times where the legislature has been asking for additional dollars. They want to know that you're maximizing those. So within the office, I call it like the budget to bill life cycle of taxpayer dollars, where you can follow the money, that you can see an appropriation for $50 million. You know that it went to the Department of Commerce. You know who was granted those dollars and when the comptroller paid them. The vendor payment program, it hasn't been utilized in quite a few years because we don't have a bill backlog. But I'm trying to think proactively about if there is strain on our revenues from the federal government. This program allows us to work with a financial institution to essentially have them pay off some of our debt to our small businesses. And then we owe the financial institution that bill as well as the interest on that until we pay it. And not that I ever want to get into a situation where we have a bill backlog again, but I know that I can sleep at night that a nonprofit or a small business kept their lights on and that they are able to operate because they can't float for 90 plus days, and that we owe as a state a financial institution dollars. So trying to figure out how we shift some of that burden if we ever get into those spots. I could talk about this all day. Even the prevailing wage. I think we need to codify enforcement within the comptroller's office, and that means, writing legislation and getting it passed, something I'm very comfortable doing.
As you're aware, the Illinois splits its financial responsibilities among a couple of constitutional offices. The comptroller acts sort of as the checkbook, but then the treasurer acts as the chief investment officer of the state. There's kind of been an age-old debate about whether those two offices should be merged, whether you can save, maybe save some administrative costs and have one person do that function. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is something that should be explored?
Always down to learn new things. I will say, like, if you're not changing your mind, you've stopped learning. But in this particular case, I do think the office should be continued to be separated, not just because I'm running for comptroller, but because, to no one's surprise, the reason that they were separated in the late 1960s was because of fraud, because the same person investing the money was also writing the checks. And we just don't have a great history in Illinois. I mean, even as recently as Dixon, there was an entire Netflix documentary about the fact that fraud can occur when both of these roles are combined. So at this point, I just don't feel like we've earned the trust back of the taxpayers of Illinois to combine those offices. But I also have concerns about what it would do to our credit rating. So any type of administrative costs that we would save, because the offices do two separate things, I think would be overshadowed by potentially a hit to our credit rating. Because you all know that, our credit rating directly impacts our bond rating, which impacts our long-term borrowing. So I'm very protective of that credit rating, because that's just money that we are able to save when we have better credit ratings.
Well, as you know, the comptroller's office has a lot of oversight duties besides just the duty of writing the checks and paying the bills. That includes investigating fraud and even some odd duties that wound up in that office, like regulating cemeteries.
I was about to say, I knew exactly what you're going to say.
Sort of wondering, what is one of the sort of under the radar responsibilities that you would prioritize, and why would you focus on that?
So local government audits. I don't know why I get so excited about the idea of reforming local government audits, but I really do. It's like the local government person in me. So right now there are multiple statutes. I think there are 4 statutes that oversee the audit requirements for local units of government. And we have a lot of them, which is a whole nother conversation. But some of these units of government have zero revenues. Some of them have, revenues of tens of thousands. Some of them have millions of dollars of revenues. And they're all treated in this very convoluted way. So one of the things I would like to work on, and I've actually talked with the CPA Society and the Townships Association, they're all on board with this, is streamlining. Kind of creating a tiered system for audits for what level of revenues you receive as a local unit of government and what your auditing requirement's going to be. That will save taxpayer monies on the local level. We don't even have enough CPAs in the state of Illinois to do the amount of audits that we require within the comptroller's office, and it won't risk any type of transparency or risk to identifying fraud. This is just so that we actually get the information, because the vast amount of audits are not completed on time or completed at all. You also see a lot of turnover in these local units of government, and the individuals that are staffing them are not necessarily trained to do this type of work. So I'm really focused on making sure that these local units of government can do the work that they were elected to do, which is serving their communities, versus the hundreds of staffing hours that they're going to have to do complying with an audit that may not be relevant to them. That's overly onerous. And then creating a technical assistance office within the comptroller's office to assist them. It just goes back, like I said, to kind of a constituent services, being able to work with someone, being able to deploy them out to the local municipality if necessary to assist them.
Despite some recent gains, Illinois' rainy day fund, currently about $2.4 billion, it really only covers about a couple of weeks worth of operating expenses, which is far below what fiscal experts recommend, maybe closer to a month or two. How much should the state set aside for reserves, and what priority should it have in future budgets?
Yeah, so we're at 2.4. You said it's about 14 days. The national average is about 50 days of a rainy day fund for states being able to float, with the goal being, obviously, you never really tap into that rainy day fund, because the concern is that if we tap into the rainy day fund, then that's going to be an impact to our credit rating. I will say, as a comptroller, you have the ability to advocate. And I think that making sure that we are paying our pension debt as well as the rainy day fund, making sure that the interest stays in the rainy day fund is incredibly important to me, and something that I'll probably be very vocal about, using my megaphone for that. There are multiple streams that we have dedicated to the rainy day fund, but we tend to move them around when we have state budget issues. I think this last budget, FY26, we only did the interest within the rainy day fund versus, we have some cannabis revenue that tends to go there. If we have debt we pay off early, those savings go in there. So I'm very actually strongly in support of making sure we have a robust rainy day fund, because I also do, it all goes back to the credit rating. If we can increase our credit rating, showing that we have financial stability, that we have those reserves, and it helps us in the long term with our long-term borrowing, it's something that we need to do.
And just to quickly follow up, one of those streams was a monthly transfer to the rainy day fund from the general revenue fund. I believe it was about 3.75 million, about $45 million annually. It was not included in this year's budget. It was suspended. Would you advocate for restoring that monthly transfer?
Yeah, I would. I think that I understand, though, that right now, just being a member of the General Assembly, how difficult some of these choices are. So I don't take it lightly. But I do try to, I try to communicate with people that when we have the reserves, when we build up this rainy day fund, it means that we can make long-term investments in public infrastructure, in education, in some of those things, that long-term spending, that long-term planning, and it costs us less because of the interest rates when we go into the bond market and we borrow. So ultimately, it does help us, but it is hard, I think, for some people to see that on the horizon when we could immediately fund services within that, that existing fiscal year. So it is you have to pick and choose in some cases, but I do think that the rainy day fund is something that we should choose.
You chair one of the House committees that deals with pensions, and you've mentioned pensions during this conversation. Do you have any thoughts on how the comptroller can help address the state's ongoing unfunded liability problem with state pensions?
Yeah, I chair financial institutions, which is not necessarily deal directly with pensions, but I can still very much answer your questions, because pensions is something that I've kind of thrown myself into. We've seen our pension liability kind of in flux a little bit. It's gone down from 141 to 120, now back up to 141 billion. One of the ways that we can do better as a state is paying off our pension debt earlier. There is significant amount within that pension liability that is interest, not member benefits. So the more that we pay off, when we make those earlier payments, that's just free money that we're making back. We also could refinance some of our pension debt. If we have a strong credit rating that has better interest rates when we borrow and we go to the bond market, there should be a conversation about whether we refinance our pension debt, because the interest on the borrowing from our bonds is a better rate for the state of Illinois than the interest that we're paying on that unfunded liability. So I think that, again, I'm talking from the legislator point of view and some of the things that I would like to see legislated, but that's something that I would very much advocate for as someone who makes those payments, who is, to Brendan's point, the checkbook for the state of Illinois.
And you've already touched upon this a little bit, but what are some ways that the state can improve its credit rating?
So that's one. So I think the pension liability is probably the number one thing that we see from the credit rating agencies that they're paying close attention to. Any changes to our pension obligations, based off what I've read from S&P and from Moody's, that always is the first thing that they talk about with stabilization, wanting to know that the state's finances, their long-term finances, are taken care of. I think that growing our rainy day fund, as we talked about, is going to be something that demonstrates fiscal responsibility. But I have been incredibly proud of this administration and the governor when he entered that office, and being able to get us to the place we are. 10 credit rating upgrades is something to be very proud of. So I think we're headed in that direction, but it's going to get tougher as we kind of deal with the chaos at the federal level. So we have to keep our eye on the prize.
State Representative Margaret Croke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was State Representative Margaret Croke, a Democratic candidate for Illinois Comptroller. And this has been a special edition of Capitol Cast, Election 2026. Capitol Cast is a production of Capitol News Illinois, a public affairs reporting project of the Illinois Press Foundation with funding from the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. Continue following us for more podcast interviews and coverage of the 2026 elections. Until next time, on behalf of the entire Capitol News Illinois team, thank you for listening.